One thing a lot of people don't know about me is that I am not a car guy. I honestly don't give a crap about American muscle cars. I care even less about Japanese riced out imports, and supercars don't exactly tickle my fancy. But there is an asterisk to that, and that is I am a huge Porsche fan. I absolutely love Porsches. The 911 Carrera is my go-to. The 918 Spyder is probably my dream car. And then, of course, there is the GOAT, the 917. But my love of Porsches doesn't just end with their cars, but it also extends to, well, their tanks. Or in this case, their heavy tank destroyer. Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a model showcase video for this 1/35th scale German World War II Ferdinand tank destroyer. The model in this video is built for my own personal collection and is not for sale and or purchase. However, as I often mention in these videos, I frequently take on commission build projects from models ranging between 1/35th scale and 1/6 scale. For availability and pricing information, that would be best by contacting me through the email address listed below, which is info@EastCoastArmory.com. This model here is built mostly out of the box, however I did deviate from the kit quite a bit in order to give the model some extra details as well as some aftermarket upgrades. In this video we're going to be going over all this information as well as giving this model a thorough in-box review. On top of that, there are several aspects of this build here in order to watch out for, and again this is something else I'm going to be going over in this video. So with all that out of the way, just sit back and relax. There's going to be a bit of info coming right at you. To start this video off, let's go ahead and take a quick walk around this model. And this vehicle here is the World War II German Panzerjäger Sd.Kfz 184, or if you want to be a little quicker with it, the Ferdinand. This is a very interesting vehicle in both ways. One, the engineering and the design aspect of the vehicle is very unique and different compared to other vehicles of the era and even today, but also with the background and the developmental history of this vehicle is something that, again, is quite unique. The vehicle itself dates back to 1942. At this time, Germany was looking for a heavy breakthrough tank, a vehicle that was going to have very superior armor as well as an even more powerful main armament. And two firms stepped up to the plate in order to fulfill this contract, one of which was Henschel and the other was Porsche. And yes, that Porsche. Ferdinand Porsche to be specific, as his car company didn't exist yet and that was his son that started it, but that's neither here nor there. Both Henschel and Porsche hit the project running, coming up with two very different designs. They went ahead and produced two prototypes and sent it off for evaluation to the German High Command. The Henschel design was more or less a traditional standard type of a vehicle where it had a standard gas engine in it, standard transmission, suspension, and so on. However, Porsche always liked to do things a bit differently. He went ahead and came up with some radically different ideas and implemented it on his tank design. Instead of a standard drive system where you have the engine powering a transmission, what Porsche went ahead and did was something that was very different. He went ahead and had a gas-electric hybrid type system where the vehicle runs more like, say, a diesel locomotive, where you have the gas engines, in this case two V12 gasoline engines, and instead of for them powering the tracks directly, they actually turn generators, which in turn create electricity to drive electric motors that propel the vehicle. Because of this electric drive system, the vehicle needed 4 sprockets for its propulsion, and this really gave the vehicle its iconic look. The other thing that's noteworthy about the Porsche design was its suspension. Rather than the standard swing arm type torsion bar setup that we see on most other German tanks, the Porsche system utilizes a bogie torsion bar system, which was again very different and very unique. After a little bit of time of development, both vehicles from both firms were ready to be tested and evaluated by the German High Command, to which the Porsche design failed absolutely miserably. It was a complete disaster in every which way, and Henschel was awarded the contract, and that vehicle of course would turn into the Tiger 1. However, the story doesn't end there, because apparently Porsche must have really thought that he was a shoo-in for this contract, so while the vehicle was getting tested, there was an order put out to assemble 90-something hulls. And when the contract fell through, they had these hulls sitting around not doing anything, so they came up with the pretty smart decision to retrofit them and transform them from a tank to a heavy tank destroyer. Part of the conversion required a complete reconfiguration of the interior layout, where the engine compartment was moved from the rear to the middle of the vehicle. The driver and co-driver were now still in the front, but isolated from the remainder of the crew, who now have a complete fighting compartment that's fully enclosed in an armored casemate found on the rear. For the vehicle's armament, it was armed with a very high-velocity 8.8 centimeter PaK 43/2 L71 armament. This is a very powerful armament and was more than capable at dealing with enemy tanks of the period, more specifically at extended ranges. This is also why the tank was paired up with some excellent optics of the period. Even though the vehicle doesn't have a turret, the idea was that you don't need one because of the extended range that you have with this armament. You could plink at enemy tanks long before they come into range, and you're now vulnerable to their armament. And if they do get up close, the vehicle was very heavily armored. The vehicle weighed in at 65 tons, which is quite substantial in size. It's also with this long standoff approach is why the vehicle didn't have a secondary armament. There's no bow MG or coaxial MG found on this vehicle. Its only armament was the main anti-tank gun. The vehicle, of course, was given the name Ferdinand in honor of its creator, and this is interesting because this is one of the few vehicles out there that's named specifically first name basis of its creator. The only other one I can think of is the Bob Semple tank, and maybe Christie come to mind, but other than that, Ferdinand's kind of unique in that aspect too. The absence of a bow MG would be this vehicle's major Achilles heel. Fast forward a little bit to the Battle of Kursk, where you have the Ferdinand, as well as the other new German Wunderpanzers of the time, being the Panther and the Tiger I, square up against the Russians. And it didn't really work out all that well for the Ferdinand. The vehicles were really prone to malfunctions and breaking down, which was really problematic, but also the absence of any sort of secondary armament really was not great. The idea and concept of you can stand off at ranges and pick off enemy tanks was great. However, when you have a bunch of pissed off Russians around you throwing Molotov cocktails through your engine grills, it's going to become a bit of an issue. So much so that after the Battle of Kursk, the remaining vehicles that survived or were surviving were sent back for retrofits in Austria, where they modified the hull to have a bow MG. These vehicles that received this modification had a name change from Ferdinand to Elephant. Out of the 91 vehicles or so that were produced, only 2 examples are left on the planet. One is a Ferdinand, and that one is housed in Kubinka. More likely, this one was captured by the Russians in the Battle of Kursk. And the other one is an Elephant that was captured by the US Army in Italy, and that vehicle is or was on display for a long time in Aberdeen, and I think right now, at the time of filming this, might be still in England in the Bovington collection. Before we go any further with the video, let's go ahead and take a step back to when the model was first started in order to get a good idea on what the base starter kit supplies you with. And here's the model at the start of the build. For the base starter kit, I'll be utilizing this 1/35 scale Dragon Ferdinand German tank destroyer kit. This is a really, really cool kit. First, it's a really cool subject matter, but the kit itself is also an interesting one. The Dragon Elephant family of kits dates back to the year 2000. And before that, if you wanted a vehicle of this pattern, your options were limited to say the least, in that you had literally one option available, which was the Elephant tank destroyer kit from Italy. That is actually a pretty cool kit itself, but the tooling dates back to the mid-1970s time frame. So 30 years on from that time frame, the tooling was going to start showing its age, and the market was ready for something with newer tooling. And Dragon went ahead, stepped up to the plate, and produced their very first Ferdinand kit at that time. The Dragon kit was made with all brand new tooling and was state-of-the-art of the era. And again, this was some pretty significant news because versions of the Elephant and the Ferdinand out there were very, very limited, like I just mentioned. For an actual Ferdinand kit, you were completely on your own because there was no Ferdinands in existence, and your only bet of building a Ferdinand was to take the Italy one and modify it and rework it from there, backdating it to the MG list counterpart. Plus, you have to do a few other fittings. That's where this kit originally stems from. Dragon never was one to rest on their laurels. They went ahead and kept on re-releasing and updating their Elephant and Ferdinand kits as the years progressed, and they've tooled up at this point, I believe, a little under a dozen of the variants based on the original tooling. Some people claim that's a detriment, but those people tend to be a bit, shall we say, elitist with their taste. This jumps forward to the year 2010, and that is the release era that we have here. What's cool about this kit is that this kit here is from their premium line. And Dragon, they always have ways of coming up with new, not gimmicks, but new ways that they market their models. So first, this is part of their 39 to 45 series, which is their biggest product range in their catalog, and it's always ever expanding, of arguably nothing more than Panzer IVs and Panthers over and over again, but this kit here is in that line. And this one here is the premium edition, where it's even better than the Smart Kit, because this kit gives you lots of other extra amenities to go with the base standard tooling. When I use the term super kits in my videos, I'm basically referring to something like this, and this here is indeed a super kit. And you'll see that once I continue with the review. As for this particular model, I have had this one sitting in the stash now for about a year, and the acquisition was pretty unique. You see, unlike the other models that are on this channel, where I generally buy them off of eBay, or I encounter one at a swap meet or a model show, or even find one at a local hobby shop, this one here I acquired from a different source. Actually, it found me. About a year ago, I was contacted by a viewer, one of you all out there, and this individual, I guess he would buy out those storage units and sell the merchandise that he would find, and I guess one of the lockers that he purchased was a hobby shop, or a hobby shop supplier that went under, and so he had basically an entire warehouse full of 1/35 scale model kits. I know, it was literally like a dream come true. It was kind of like an overdose in a way. And he went ahead and was going to sell the kits on his own. But before he did that, he went ahead and reached out to many of the model builders on YouTube to see if they would be interested in several of his kits of choice. And he would also offer them at a very reduced price. And first I want to say, if you're watching this, I am honored that you hold me to such esteem that I'm compared with some of the other individuals that are out there, specifically the ones that I personally respect. And you know, he basically showed me like about 3 or 4 images of a pile of kits, and it was like a kid in a candy store. So I was able to purchase a good number of them. Of course, I wanted one of each, but budget is a thing. But I was able to have my pick of the litter, and I did pick some very interesting kits. And yes, they are eventually going to filter their way into the lineup. So it was a really, really, really good haul. Regardless, when I saw this kit, I instantly wanted it because I always wanted to get a Dragon version of the Elephant or the Ferdinand. These kits, like I said before, are awesome. I built the Italeri one a little while ago, back in 2003. That model's perfectly fine. By the way, it's never getting the OCR treatment. I wanted to grab one of these older kits from Dragon, specifically their Elephants. This one here was a perfect opportunity to. It's got older tooling, but it has the upgrades to it. So I got this kit for about 15 or 20 US dollars, if I could recall, which is a fraction of the price that these kits run these days. I just checked up eBay to see what they run on the market, and these things are getting up there in price. I saw a few listings for about 80 or 90 US dollars. So basically the going rate of these things at the moment. Of course, this is always subject to change at the time of filming this video. So being able to pick it up for the price I did, definitely one that I appreciate greatly. If you're watching this, you're the man. Thank you for reaching out. And if you ever encounter another lot of models, be sure to hit me up. As for the box art and graphic design, well, actually, it's still wrapped in its shrink wrap. And let me go ahead and remove that first, just because it's adding a bit of glare. So let's go ahead and peel this off here, since I am actually opening this up. With the shrink wrap off, here we can see the model in question. So starting with the box art, beautiful box art. The vehicle is depicted in Kursk. So we have here the Ferdinand with that distinctive green net type camo, which is one that was, it's basically like the Merc pattern on a Starship or an M60. It just works. And for the Ferdinand hand here, it's definitely one that matches the bill. The work, I believe it's done by Volstead or Vince. It's either one or the other. I'm not seeing the illustrator's name written down, but regardless, it's quite typical of the quality you see on several other Dragon box arts, which means they are excellent. A beautiful illustration nonetheless. We have here the Ferdinand front and center, and we have a bunch of knocked out and burning T-34s in the background. Quite typical for Pravorovka. And yeah, the setting is excellent. The rendering on all the vehicles in question are also very good. Basically what you would expect for a Dragon box art. Here we have the Dragon logo right there on the lower left-hand corner with the lizard in all of its glory. Some quick little verbiage telling you that it's an unassembled plastic model kit and you need to be at least 14 years old or older to build it. And this kit here, I think you need to add a little bit more years because I'm pretty sure a 14-year-old is not going to be able to handle one of these. And if he can, he is definitely a whiz and a guru at building one of these. In the background, or I should say on the top portion over here, we have the remainder of the typography. 39 to 45 series, Sd.Kfz 184, Ferdinand, Curse 43, and there goes the Premium Edition logo. All of the Premium Edition tanks, by the way, have this lime green type banner that we see. And, Dragon, again, has been known to do stuff like that, either be it their smart kits or their, shall I say, black label, which is always one that pisses off people. But regardless, the Dragon's been known to do stuff like that as time goes on. On the side panel here, this is kit number 6495. Again, typical type layout with the graphic design. We have here a thumbnail of the illustration, that dark green type coloring for the remainder of the work. And then, of course, being a premium, it has the lime green bottom stripe. Side tab over here, more verbiage. We have two different options on how to paint this thing. We have the net camo like the one on the cover, and then we also have a polka dot type. We have apparently several options for decals, as you can see right there. The decals are from Cartograph, which is a fantastic decal company, and I really love it when companies utilize their printings. Their printings are probably some of the best in the decal game, and I've had some excellent results with their decals in the past. So again, jumping ahead a little bit, I'm not predicting any issues with this one here. Here we have some corporate info. Again, 2012. Is the official date. I said 2010 earlier. I misspoke. It's 2012. Dragon Care, all that good stuff. This side here, we have another thumbnail from the side tab, as I mentioned before. And on this side here, we get to start seeing some of the unique features that are found on this kit. So, like I stated before, this is a super kit. And this is a kit that will give you some extra detail parts made out of some nice materials. So this kit, out of the box, is going to supply you with photo etch, aluminum barrel, as well as other components made out of metal. Here we can even see supplied a little chain for the pistol port, so that's going to be something that's going to be really fun to crack into. You see some samples here of some more of the PE that is supplied with this model. And you can see the detailing of also the diamond plate that is present on this example. Dragon kits from this era, they started to utilize the back panel for more advertising. And we've seen this on a few other of their kits in the past. So here again is the picture of the vehicle. Note all the PE, and the PE even has an option for the bin to be left in the open position where you have the tools on the inside. I'm probably not going to be doing that, but regardless, it's there if you feel so inclined. Again, turned aluminum barrel that is supplied, a slide molded multi-part muzzle brake for optimum detailing. Some excellent details here for the periscopes, which I believe are molded in clear. Again, you start seeing a lot of extra type of amenities like that on these kits. We have even the U-shackle has the appropriate pin that locks it in place. The jack looks great. The jack block is a multi-part photo etch assembly. That's going to be fun. And, well, least said about that, the better. Okay, so let's go ahead and crack this box open. No, before I do that, this box, in addition to having the shrink wrap, has the little sticker circles that are on either side for... And there's 4 stickers. All right. Okay, so with the model cracked open, let's go ahead and look at the stuff. I'll go ahead and touch upon this later. So here we have the kit components in question. So like I mentioned before, this kit is building up on previous releases that had components all done in injection molded polystyrene. And this kit here is just adding upon which. So just like with the Smart kits, you have some options available if you want to roll with the PE or if you want to keep the injection molded plastic, whichever works best for you. So starting with this runner here, you get to see, well, the engine deck with the grills right there. We have the other grills right here on the top. It looks like it has a double layer of grills, which lends for better accuracy. We have here the front armor plate with the large acorn type fasteners, or conical type fasteners, I believe would be the better term. There's the round distinctive loader's hatch, or the rear hatch, with the, apparently if you watch Girls and Panzers, the weak point on the vehicle where an empty leak can penetrate it. Carrying on further takes us to the tin work. On the outer appearance, we have integrally molded on diamond plate, which is true to form. I've seen the real elephant or when it was in Aberdeen with the horrible paint job, but regardless, I've seen it, and yeah, it's definitely, it looks the part. Here goes the certain back sections of the hull that need to be glued together in order to form that box shape. And that's all she wrote for these two runners over here. Next set of runners contains the armament, where we have the inner mantlet detailing and the rotor. We have here two options of barrels, where we have a single slide molded one as well as a two-piece assembly. I honestly don't know why they would even give you that as a suggestion, but here we are. The interior does have several components to flesh out the recuperators and other aspects of it. It's not going to be relevant for this build because I'm going to build it with the hatches closed, but that is something to keep in mind. This run here contains the suspension components, and they look excellent. They're very nicely rendered out. You can see the wheels there with the appropriate detailing with those little spherical cutouts found on the metal plate. Which, by the way, spoiler, I just want to say this right now. The wheels on these vehicles are indeed rubber. A lot of people screw that up, but we'll be circling back to that as the video goes on. But rest assured, they are rubber. As for the, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get some comments, but I can attest they're rubber personally. Anyway, we can see the swing arms themselves, the unique Porsche suspension that, you know, is, again, carryover from when this thing was supposed to be runner for the Tiger 1. Or for the Tiger 1 project, which it eventually lost and the hulls were turned into tank destroyers, but I've already mentioned that in more depth in the spinny spin portion of the video. So in typical Dragon format, you're going to have lots of spare parts on this one. Because, again, they didn't change the molds. They're just giving you the old molds with new tooling parts. So that's something to keep in mind. Here goes some of those new tooling parts. So here we have here the muzzle brake, tow cable and connectors. We have here a set of German tools, which are very handy to keep on hand. Even if you don't need them for this build, they come in handy like I did on the Aquarod that I built a little while ago. And this runner here has some more cool accessories and clear periscopes. A very nice feature, and again, typically what you see on super kits. So with that out of the way, this brings us to the main portion of this model, which is the hull and the rear hut. So the hull itself, it's all integrally molded as one tub piece. The plastic is pretty thick, which is good. It makes for a nice sturdy model. I always like it when companies do that. The detailing is excellent. We have here the bottom plate here with the rivets. We even have all the various axis panels, which would be found on the real vehicle. And we have even weld beads found on the plate detailing where everything makes its connections. Weld lines look excellent. I look and see if there are any torch cut lines, but I can't see any at this time. But the welds do look nicely rendered out. There are some suggestion points to mount on equipment, but we'll see how that pans out as the video goes on. You may have to delete some. Generally, that's the case on some of these kits, but we'll see again how that works. On the hut section, again, nice like scale thickness molding, which is kind of cool. It's a single piece, so you don't have to worry about any seams in that type of manner. Again, the puzzle type detailing is excellently rendered out with the weld beads and the appropriate cutouts in the certain locations. The optic sliding hatch over there looks great, as does all the hinge work that are present. Very nicely detailed part. The parts are molded in the same type of dragon plastic that we would see from kits, again, from the more modern era. If you've ever seen my reviews on older dragon kits from the 90s, they tend to be molded in a slightly different type of plastic compared to the ones from the 2000s onward till today. So this has definitely the latter type plastic. The next runner is photo etch, and we have lots of photo etch. So if you don't know anything about photo etch, it's probably not a good idea to get this kit. And here we have the aluminum barrel, as I mentioned before. So this kit gives you an option of 3 type of barrels. You have the 2-piece assembly, the single slide mold, and the aluminum one. So that's great if I have any other old elephants that need a refit, or if I ever encounter one that is an OTR candidate, I have spare parts. So as you can see, this kit is gorgeous. I absolutely am digging it. And now here comes to the part that is the asterisk. But before I do that, let's go over the parts that are not up to that portion just yet. And these are some of the other detail fittings. So starting with the tow hooks, those were the ones I mentioned before that have the appropriate pin detailing. And these are actually made out of die cast, which is a phenomenally cool bit of accessory that this kit does have. That is awesome right there. They are drilled out, and it looks like they're ready for installation right out of the box. Excellent. We do have some of that dragon metal tow cable that's seen on several of their other kits. Again, another nice feature indeed. Here we got some PE for German latches for the tool posts. And we also have here the length of brass chain for the pistol ports. And we also have turned CNC pins for those same die-cast U-hooks that I mentioned before. Again, these are all good things. Excellent. Nice quality. We have here yet some more photo etch, and we even have a little bit of mesh work right there, which is pretty cool. I see some tool posts, I see some angle structures, and I see some other bits of equipment that are going to probably slow me down on this build. But regardless, it's going to make for an excellent build nonetheless. And here we have the decal sheet. Again, cartograph, blue paper backing. As I mentioned before, their quality of work is usually excellent. So I'm predicting good results for this one here. Okay, so that's it for the positive attributes on this kit. Now let's go to the one that would have kneecapped me in the past and prevented me from getting one of these kits for the longest period of time. The track. This kit here is just like many of the other Dragon kits of the period, and unfortunately they're going back to that because idiots keep complaining about DS-styrene, and that is the use of individual link and link tracks. But John, these are magic tracks. Abracadabra, Kyle Shazam, you have been fooled because these tracks are a scam. These tracks are link and link by another name, which means they're trash. I can't stand them. These tracks are not going to be used on this model at all. I don't care if they're magic tracks. They're shit. They're not being used on this kit. Instead, I have a brainstem, and I'm going to be swapping them out with a set of workable metal track links from our model. I'd love to bring them onto the table at this time, but unfortunately, I just ordered them, and they're going to be shipping from overseas. So by the time this video drops, I obviously will have them in hand. They'll be fitted to the model. Also, I want to point out that the workable track links are going to be the subject matter of their own track link review and tutorial video, which should drop shortly after this video makes its debut. So definitely stay tuned and hang around the channel. Regardless, I'm not even going to review these things. I'm not going to give these things the time of day. They're going to poof their way into my spare parts bin where they belong, which is a merciful ending because they belong in the trash. I can't stand those things. And they ruin tanks. I don't care what anyone says. They're trash. So this now leads us to the instructions. So in typical Dragon format, we do have some areas that are not going to be used on this kit, and surprisingly, there's quite a few parts that are still going to be used, but I could tell that some of them are optional. Obviously, the tin work is one of them. If you can't use the PE, you got the plastic ones to give you a nice lifeboat. And but there are some other parts that are just straight up omitted, and those are the ones in blue, as we typically see on Dragon kits. Opening it up, we have here just your typical Dragon CAD type drawings, or actually, I know these tend to look like they're hand drawn. I think these might be hand drafted drawings, actually, come to think of it. which is kind of interesting because generally we use the Dragon uses CAD for these. Yeah, that's not going to fly. I'm not going to be utilizing that. Yeah, pretty cool. Probably the strangest Dragon instruction I've ever seen, though, was on the Hummel that I built. That one actually had, like, color renderings, which was interesting. I was the only kid I ever saw something like that on. Back to this one here. Obviously, lots and lots and lots of stuff happening. This is very similar to the 8-wheeled German armored car that I did a little while ago. That was a smart kit from Dragon that had the Pack 40 on it. Much along the same lines, where there's a gazillion things going on in these instructions over here, and you can easily lose situational awareness and omit a part or two. So that is something that the builder definitely needs to stay on the ball for. Because as you can see, there's a lot going on here. And you don't want to lose track, you don't want to accidentally omit something, and you definitely don't want to have anything go to lost party, because this is the type of kit where something can easily do that with. The instructions look pretty straightforward, and if there is anything that is awry, rest assured I will most definitely bring that up as the video continues. Jumping forward a little bit takes us to the armament going through its course of production. And one thing that I want to mention at this time, this is true for basically all tanks that are a casemate design, and also a lot of other vehicles that have just a big encompassing mantlet, is I like to go ahead and prior to the installation to pre-prime and add the base coat to the following areas. This is relevant because on vehicles like this, trying to get access to these areas over here are very difficult, and if you do not have any paint on these sections, what will eventually happen is that after the tank is painted and you move the barrel one way or another, you're going to have bare exposed material. And that's definitely something that's less than ideal. So before that, the pieces get painted. For the paint application, the area here was pretty much masked up just to reduce the paint buildup on certain areas that I really don't want it. And the application of the primer was the flat black spray paint, which will be used again as the build comes closer to the finish line. And for the Dunkelgelb here, this is just Tamiya Dunkelgelb, and it was applied via the airbrush. You want to use an airbrush for this type of application as opposed to a paintbrush because it's just so much thinner as a coat and as a layer as opposed to a paintbrush. And even though you can thoroughly dilute the paint and apply it with the paintbrush, it'll come out just fine. For me, it's easier for this application to just roll with the airbrush. A couple passes, you're done. So that's where we're at with here. On these two sections of the mantlet and the mantlet guard, they too went through the same procedure, flat black with the Dunkelgelb coating. On this one here, I actually went ahead and pre-assembled these two sections, which were originally on this section of the sprue. With the way the kit is designed, these are actually two pieces that get glued together and then get glued to the mantlet. It's a bit of a overcomplication. I don't see why they couldn't just mold it as one piece, but that's just how this kit is. So you do have two pieces to get glued together. The plus side is you get a nice detailed flange with a natural seam running on these two sections over here, and that's relevant because on the real Elephant or Ferdinand, these two sections were two separate pieces that get bolted together via the flange system that we have. So in that essence, it's detailed in that regard that you have that, but it's just a bit overcomplicated. Either way, it still goes together very well. Of course, both sides were painted, although this side here, it's not really relevant. It's going to be painted with the rest of the model, but I went ahead and got it painted at this point for, again, why not reasons. On that note, I'm probably going to go ahead and mask up this section and apply the primer and the base to this area over here, again, just to make the paint of these areas a bit easily done as the build continues. So I'm going to go ahead and do that before I go ahead and commence with the remainder of the build. But this time here, I can go ahead and peel off the masks. Just masking tape right here. And there we go. The paint is only where I want it and not where I don't. Let's go to the trash. And there we have it. As for what the piece looks like installed, just drops in like this right over here. The kit does have some nice engineering that the pieces line up appropriately. And once it's assembled, it goes in that format. I just want to mention at this time, the kit barrel can only go up and down. There is no side to side, so you are fixed in one plane. However, for the purposes of this build here, it doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things. I will say that some other builds out there, some other variations of the Ferdinand kit, be it from, I think, Italeri, the old school one, and also more likely the Amusing Hobby kits, they probably do have transverse also, but for the Dragon one here, it's just primarily elevation. Jumping forward a little bit brings us to the model's condition that we have here, where it is assembled, and at this point here it's actually ready to slide off into paint. At this point here, there are some things I want to mention at this build, which is better done at this point as opposed to when the thing is fully completed. But to do that, let me go ahead and bring the camera in closer. So the first thing I do want to mention is that the build goes together pretty well. These Dragon kits from this area here, being the late 90s, early 2000s, do go together pretty well and mostly effortlessly. The pieces are well designed in that manner. The kit over here, you'll notice, does not have the suspension swing arms fitted at this point, and that is because I need them off just so it ensures me better ability to paint them thoroughly and then glue them on after the fact. Again, this is something that I always stress on these builds. You always want to paint the suspension thoroughly before installation, and on some builds here this requires you to actually have the thing in sub-assemblies where we have the pieces separate, you paint them, and then you could install them onto the model. This is the best way to ensure that there are no missed spots, which can happen if you go ahead and build everything in one piece. Also, while on the suspension, you'll see that the pieces are actually form-fitting, where the kit does have a quasi-functional suspension, in that if you don't install this piece over here with the little drop of glue, it has some form-fitting capabilities to it, which will help if you want to place it on some uneven terrain, say on a diorama or something similar. Of course, since this model here is getting workable track links, that is something that is going to become a bit more relevant compared to just gluing it all static. It's one of those things where if you wanted to get the piece to function, you literally just don't add a drop of glue in one location, and the piece will have functionality that comes naturally. As for the piece themselves, these are something you want to pay attention to because they are a right and left hand specific unit, and you want to make sure that you have the right piece where it needs to go. Also, on the cylinder section over here, this is a multi-part assembly, so seam work is something you are going to have to contend with, and that's why you'll notice that the piece has been pre-primed prior to the installation onto the swing arm. Also, the inside portion of the housing was also painted with a little bit of flat black, again to act as a primer and to make sure to cover my bases that paint goes where it needs to go. From here though, the pieces can be painted separately, and then when the time comes, it can be fitted in place. With the suspension out of the way, this brings us to the model itself, or I should say the hull. And the first thing you'll notice is that I did not utilize the PE tin work, which was one of the kit's features. There's two reasons for this. One was a complete accident. I was kind of going through the motions of the build, and I negated to go ahead and remember that, oh crap, this kit does have PE tin work. And I just went with the plastic ones instead, and when I realized it's to the point where I wasn't going to be able to remove them. So I'm like, you know what, for this build, screw it, I'll leave them in place, and I'll just save the PE for another Dragon, Ferdinand, and or Elephant build that may come down the pipeline. So if another kit comes along, rest assured I will add the PE to that. However, the PE is actually a double-edged sword where it has some benefits, but it also has some negatives to it. And this is actually true for many of the other PE sections found on this model. One common trait I like to say on this channel is just because it's metal doesn't mean it's better, and that is definitely something that's going to come into play on this build here. So as I referenced before, the kit does have some excellent diamond plate texturing found on the top portion, also on the bottom portion. That's where the PE is actually really good. Where the PE becomes a little bit less so is with the bottom sponsons. So if we flip the model over, you can see that we have the bottom sponsons over here that have their detailing, which will include the exhaust manifold port, as well as also these track derailleurs that we have right here on either side. And this is important because this bit of detailing is found on the plastic tooling, but it's not found on the PE. So if you're going to install the PE, you're going to be missing the sponson and those other details that I mentioned, and they are quite important. But on the flip side, you do get the diamond plate weaves, which is great, but without the other details, which in my opinion are a bit more prominent, it's really not exactly helping you. The best is actually, if I was to do this again, I would actually use both. And what I mean by that is I'll take the stock ones here, I'd amputate the molded in section of the tin work, just having this sponson midsection, and then I would glue that to the model, and then the PE I would use around it just like it would be used on the real unit. If you are working on one of these premium edition elephants, that is the best way to go about. As for this one here, I'm rolling with it in this format, but again, if I ever get another Dragon, Ferdinand, and or Elephant, that is definitely something I'm going to keep in mind. Also on the bottom portion of tin work, you can see that there are some knockout marks here and here. These were addressed with a little bit of body work. A little bit of red putty here and some wet sanding. And this one here just polished away without the use of any putty. Aside of that, the pieces just plug in place and are good to go. On the rear section over here, you can see the ventilation system, which does have a grillwork that is present. The grillwork is PE, and again, you have an option from the older tooling to have this the opaque variant, where it's just a piece of plastic with some mesh integrally molded on. Obviously, I rolled with the PE, but if you're going to roll with the PE, one addition that I made was I went ahead and I drilled out the inner portions there of the ventilation system. On the rear portion of the hull here, there are these three little ports that are integrally molded in, but they are not molded through and through. So in order to improve the model with a Dremel with a router and some needle files, I was able to carve those sections out, hollowing them out, which will give for some greater accuracy. Outside of that, the piece just gets pre-painted, primed, and fitted in place. And you'll notice I went ahead and airbrushed the base coat in this section over here as well as on the inside, because as you may have guessed, you're not going to exactly have easy access to these locations after the unit is assembled, as you can see here. The little scoops that we have over here, these deflectors, these are the PE ones, bent to shape, and then just fitted to the appropriate locations. On the plastic one, there are indication points on where they get fitted in place. On the metal ones, that's not the case, so you are going to have to basically feel it out on exactly where the proper locations are, but it's fairly easily done. This takes to the side detailing. You can see I did utilize the photo etch for the various tow cable sections that get fitted in place. These ones are just removed off the sprue and carefully bent in place. As for the clamps, I was actually not going to utilize the PE ones. I prefer the plastic ones. The kit does have some excellent versions of these in the standard plastic and are actually quite detailed with the hinge, the wing nut, and all those details that are present. As for why I used the PE ones, quite simply put, the model trolled me because when I was installing one of the last pieces, it decided to fling off to Las Partia, so I was absolutely screwed. So I'm like, screw it, I guess I have to use the PE ones. And to be honest, I'm not really a fan of the PE ones, but I'm glad I have them. You do have the detailing in place. They'll look okay once everything is painted and weathered, but to be honest, the plastic ones are actually pretty good and go on very easily. If it wasn't for the fact I wouldn't have to act like it's scumbag and fling off Las Partia on me, I would have been rolling with the plastic ones. On the opposite side, you get to see more of the detailing, again, more of the tow cable systems that I mentioned before, and we also have the toolbox, or if you notice on this one, there's two of them. So again, the kit supplies you two toolboxes, two options, and two toolboxes. The plastic one, which was the original tooling, which they only give you one of, and they give you two of the photo etch ones to replicate the one on the box art. Well, again, just because it's metal doesn't mean it's better, because I actually didn't like the PE ones. I was in the process of assembling them, and I just didn't think they were that great, to be honest. The problem with the PE ones is that when it comes for the detailing, such as the hinge work and the straps, the plastic one is better. It's better detailed, it's finely molded, it's more three-dimensional compared to the flat PE ones, and it just, in my opinion, is a better tooling component compared to doing it in photo etch. The photo etch does have a crucial advantage, though. The advantage about the PE one, if you want to roll with the PE one, is because you want to render it with the thing in the open position. And if you're going to roll with it in the open position, then you have all the tools and tool posts that are found on the inside, and that's awesome. It has the X crimp and all that stuff. And for that application, the PE one is actually probably the best way to go. But if you're just rolling with it like I am here, all buttoned up, the PE one is completely superfluous, and the plastic one is actually the superior one in that manner. I know this is maybe something that's counterintuitive. A lot of the modeling elitists and snobs out there, they'll instantly roll with the PE because it's a shiny, dangly object like keys in front of a toddler. But keep in mind, a lot of times the PE doesn't really solve anything. And I know that's a hot take, but that's exactly my opinion on the subject. So you notice I have two of them. As I mentioned before, the kit only gives you one box. Well, I wanted the second box. I really liked the looks of it, so I went ahead and just simply made a mold of this one, and I casted a resin copy, and that's the one that we have here. I went ahead, trimmed it off the pouring basin, and it was the identical part, so I just glued it into the appropriate location. Oh, and on that note, on the kit here, and this is something that's not mentioned in the instructions, there are several suggestion points found on the hull as well as on the back of the fighting compartment sections for various bits of equipment that are obviously not for this particular kit, but are more likely for the original Elephant kit that was released by Dragon. And if you're building this one here, many of those indication points are not needed and are not utilized. So which that means is that you'll paint the model and you will have these big glaring suggestion points on boxes and other sorts of equipment that are just present on the tooling that are a complete eyesore. So bear that in mind. There were some stuff right over here, as well as also on this side over here, and they are quickly polished away with some fine sandpaper, just like we've seen on several other kits, namely from Italeri. They're known to be the suggestion king, where their tooling are recycled for more than one kit, and you have plenty of suggestion points on the tooling, and you have to selectively remove the ones that you don't want. Same thing here. Okay, on the front area, we'll get to that in a second. On the very front area takes us to the bow headlights. The headlights are the stock ones. They're nicely done. And I went ahead and added the power cable for the lights, as I customarily do on these German tank builds, as it's a way to add extra detailing. And again, it would be appropriate for the part. As for the power cable and where it plugs into, this was something I actually had to do some research on. And I was able to cross-reference the example of the American elephant that's in Aberdeen, or was in Bovington for a while. I think it's still there. But the other one, which is a Ferdinand in Kubinka, and comparing the two, I was able to determine that this is where the power cable is for the headlight. So if you look at the one specifically in Aberdeen, or the former Aberdeen example, the headlights are missing the areas where torch cut off, but you still see the remnants of the headlight housing, and you also have a welded up section right below this area here. On the kit, it's rendered on the kit as it looks almost like a fastener, but it's not. It's actually the plug for the conduit. Also on the Aberdeen one, this Vision 4 here is also welded over. Go figure. Anyway, on the Kubinka example, that one does have the headlights present, but they appear to be Soviet pattern headlights. More likely, the original ones were smashed decades ago, and just for museum's sake, they restored it with a set of just Russian headlights that they fabbed up and threw in place as a place filler. But that one, you can still see again that port in place, and I did find a picture of a wartime example that does show the wire in that area. So long story short, no matter if you're working on an Italeri, Dragon, Ryefield, or Musing, Tamiya, whoever makes your elephant and or Ferdinand of choice, if you're going to roll with the headlights, this is the location right here where you can see them entering into the vehicle. Right there. Hopefully that comes out on camera. As for the piece itself, I just drilled it out with a pin vise with a small Dremel bit, bent the piece floor wire, and just attached it to the appropriate location. Moving frontward takes us to the jack. The jack, again, you have the option of rolling with the old school kit one with the simplistic plastic parts, or you can roll with the advanced one here with the PE. Obviously, I went with the latter. And the PE for this worked pretty well. The PE bends decently. On this one over here, it does have a complex fold to it, the type of fold that's not going to really hold itself with adhesives alone. So in this one here, I actually went ahead and soldered it. 2 little drops of solder right there and there. Or actually, I should say 1 little drop of solder right over there was enough to weld the thing in place, make it nice and strong, and I could secure it to the model. On the strap over here, it's again a multi-part bend, and I was able to bend the piece accordingly. The top strap is a separate PE piece. You have to be careful not to make sure the piece flings off on you, or what they love to do is love to stick to the pliers. I love it when it does that. And you also have a small little lug. The lugs are ridiculously tiny, impossible to work with. It's almost as if they're trolling you. And by the way, a lot of PE sets are literally trolling you. There's some things where it's like, are you kidding me? Are you serious? I can't even deburr that, let alone fit it in place. But I guess it's easy when you lay everything out in Photoshop and PE it. But anyway, for the piece, I just use a small little piece of wire because the kit ones were just not working for me. And I just roll with it in that format. For the jack, you'll notice that the jack is fitted in place at this time. This is generally something I do at the end of the build, and the reason is quite simply put. The side effect of the PE is its fragility. This stuff loves to bend, and if it bends more than 2 or 3 times, it'll snap, and now you're screwed. So, in order to prevent that, I glued the jack in place, which solidifies it, making it much more robust. Which means, after the model is thoroughly painted and weathered, or during the weathering process, I'm going to have to carefully go in here and paint the jack again with some flat black with a paintbrush, just to make sure everything is painted appropriately. On the jack itself, you notice I went ahead and pre-primed it flat black. Again, this was just to make sure that the whole thing is thoroughly painted to avoid any spots of missed paint areas. Overall, the piece came out pretty well, and the one advantage that PE does have for stuff like this is that it is scale thickness. So that's one advantage that PE does have. On the tow cable cleat sections again, these were again a multi-piece assembly. They drove me up the wall, and honestly, again, the plastic ones are better. These ones are thinner, arguably more to scale thickness, but the other ones aren't too far off thickness-wise, and honestly, again, do the job just fine in my opinion. The other thing that I have, that I actually use the PE on, is the jack block, which, oh, one moment, which I have right here. So the jack block itself does require some modifications. You are going to recycle the original jack block, but you are going to sand away all the original detailing on it and replace it with the PE counterparts. As for what they are, well, we have the straps that we have right here that hold the block together. The rivets are integrally PE'd or photo etched on and look really nice. We have a little handle section. There's one on each side, as you can see. And by the way, when it comes to the PE, you don't have any spares. So what's on the sprue is on the sprue. And if you lose one, tough noogies. So that's essentially what you're dealing with here. We have the strap mechanism. Oop, get that baby in focus. So yeah, we have the strap mechanism right here. And we also have the mounts that secure this thing to the vehicle. We have a short one and a long one. Make sure you know exactly which one goes where. As for why this is currently off, again, I paint this separately and then I just secure it in place like that. But you get a good idea on what it'll look like once fully painted. This has some limited functionality to it. The piece just hinges naturally if you assemble the part correctly, and that's what we have over here. For the back section, this actually just snaps into this area over here, and this piece will have to flip up and lock into this little recess. It's something that is very chintzy, so trying to make it work is something that's very difficult, to the point where it's just not going to be durable, so I just rolled within this format. On some examples of the Ferdinands or Elephants I've done in the past, I leave it in the deployed state with the travel section in the open area so that the barrel can still go up and down. For this one though, I'm rendering it in the tucked away format like this, where it would be more akin to this thing actually in battle. As for the travel lock itself, again, it's a multi-piece assembly. The portion over here, the round curved area, is actually a two-piece assembly, which means there is a seam to contend with. This is something that was taken care of with some thick super glue and then some sanding with some sandpaper. You have to be very careful not to oversand everything. Of course, this was done without the top hinge section in place. Bear that in mind. The hinge does have a small little seam, just a mold line running through the top section. Again, easily polished away with an X-Acto. Just a pass or two was more than enough to clean up, and you could use also some sandpaper for good measure. On this area, you notice that the driver's hatch is currently not fitted in place. The driver's hatch is off the model, still on the runner. It's going to be painted in the removed position because that one does have clear periscopes, which are going to be added at the tail end of the build, and then once fitted in place, gets dropped in. The kit also gives you a photo etch periscope brush guard. It's completely ridiculous trying to bend it to shape. It's nonsense. I just rolled with the plastic one. I just gave up on the PE one, and I was, at that point, I was totally checked out. Bear in mind, I was doing that after I did the tow cable clamps over here, and I wasn't exactly in a good mood, but I took care of that. On the note of PE, we have the little gutters we have right here on each side of the fighting compartment. These were carefully bent to shape and then fitted to the model. To bend them to shape, I actually used my grab handler, where it has a nice flat section on it that will allow me to bend this at a perfect 90-degree angle. If you don't have the PE benders for, or I should say the PE bender tools in your collection, you're going to have a bad time. It's just not going to work for you. Stuff like this, you just can't bend with a plier and bend it evenly. If that's the case, you don't have it, don't get this kit. Just roll with this kit in the all-plastic format and call it a day. But if you do have the equipment, the benders, then that's when something like this becomes a bit more viable. As for the armament, you'll notice that it has been thoroughly primed, as I may have mentioned before. I'm not sure if I got that on video, but if I did, you can see what it looks like fully assembled. And for the main armament here, I rolled with the aluminum section because why not? Again, the kit gives you three really decent options. You have a standard two-piece assembly, which goes together pretty well. It's quite customarily seen. But we have another version, which is a single plastic tooling, which again is actually perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. And then we have the aluminum one here, which is even better. So at the end of the day, you will have three options to pick from. Obviously, the aluminum is the best way to go, but the other two are not crap. They will be saved for a potential project and or an OTR down the road, but who knows. The muzzle brake over here, multi-piece assembly, goes together very, very well. The seam is found on this section here where it gets glued in place. I believe you also have to glue the baffles in, or the rings in place, and this again is easily done. The kit is nicely designed. For fitting in place, the plastic tooling was made to fit on the plastic barrel, the solid plastic one. However, it didn't really fit all that well on the aluminum one. So what I did was with a Dremel bit and with a router bit, I enlarged the hole on the piece for the thing to plug into, and that's how I was able to get fit into place. On the aluminum, one trick I recommend is to score it slightly with some very fine sandpaper. This will just ensure that the paint sticks better, and also will help allow the thing to have parts glued to it a bit easier. With the way the tooling is, it's completely smooth, and you'll actually have difficulty in some occasions on getting paint and or glue to stick to it, so bear that in mind. As for the piece, it's currently left off the model and will be installed once the thing is fully painted, and as you can see, it'll do the job perfectly fine. I also like the way that the trunnion section of the main arm is nice and stiff. The thing isn't going to droop on you or anything like that. And this is exactly properly designed is what you want, because a lot of kits out there, when you have some ordnance, specifically when you place the plastic ordnance with a metal one, tends to be a bit heavy and you have a drooping issue. With this one here, that's not the case. As for the roof, all standard. I originally was actually going to see if I could get the hatches to function with the way the kit is designed. You potentially have that ability, but it just didn't work out, so I just glued them shut. I am going to have these guys in the open position, but there's clear plastic periscopes that get at these areas here, so that's why you do not see the pieces or the hatches fitted on at this time. Okay, so this now brings us to a very interesting bit of functionality I wanted to bring to the model, and that is with the pistol port. So the kit does have lots of pistol ports on it, and as we saw, the kit actually supplies you with the interior detailing as well as a length of metal chain. So I didn't want to have that go to waste, but I don't want to leave it with the rendered open format. So I made the things actually function. And to do that, didn't really take much work at all. I simply just hinged the chain onto the kit supplied pieces as per design, but what I did was on the reverse side of the chain, I glued a small little piece of plastic angle to the inside of the vehicle, and the chain's connected to it. So I basically just have the piece fastened to the inside of the model in that format, and because of that, I have functional chain. You'll see that the pieces have been primed and painted with their base coat, and once everything's all buttoned up, I'll be able to paint the outside, and the inside will still have layers of paint on it. The functionality was done to all of the pistol ports that are found on this model. And there you go. So it's a really cool feature, and it's one that was actually a bit interesting and fairly quick to design and implement. Another bit of functionality that I gave the model is with the Girls and Panzer shell ejection port, best way to put it. And I actually made the piece function because the kit does have some interior detailing on it. With how thick the materials are, you can actually drill it out with a pin vise and get the piece to function. So hopefully it's still functional. It's been a while since I played around with it, but let's see if I can get this to work with my X-Acto here. Oh, there we go. And there we have it. The hatch does open absolutely flawlessly. And you can see the interior detailing here, which includes a bunch of components that got to be fitted in place, including two little photo etch wing nuts that we have. And this is a cool little feature. And again, it's just one that just comes naturally with the kit if you just build it a certain way. On the back area here, we have some grab handles that go up to the top portion of the fining compartment. We do have a metal handle here. The kit did originally give you a plastic one. It was in place, but the model had an oopsie where it took a little bit of a fall, and that piece was shattered. So I just replaced it with one made from metal floor wire, bent to the shape, glued in place, and that's all there is to it. Starting with the model's running gear takes first the suspension, and this is using all of the kit supply components, and as you can see, they go together all right. But I will mention that during the installation, they were a bit problematic. I remember having some issues with the wheels lining up straight for some reason. They required a little bit of hand fitting in order to get the parts to mount on in the correct manner. And also to compound this, they had to time with the track, which is something that is obviously important and was something I had to take my time on. The other thing to mention was, as I referenced earlier on in the video, the tank can potentially have the ability to have a form-fitting suspension, but when rubber hit the road, it didn't really work out all that well. So much so that it came out, or it just turned out better to just glue the suspension in the static position and just leave it at that. Although this one here in the middle, the functional nature was retained somehow, but that is an outlier. And as you can see, it's kind of useless. It doesn't really do anything since the remainder of the suspension housings are rigidly mounted to the side of the hull and they do not pivot. But it is something I do want to mention. While back on the road wheels takes us to the actual composition of them, and this is very relevant for paint and weathering. This again is something that, as I mentioned before, a lot of people out there either just don't know or they incorrectly ID something that is very different from the real vehicle. And that is specifically true with the wheels, specifically the tire. This is probably the most misunderstood aspect on any of the Ferdinand family of vehicles. There's this common misconception out there that the wheels are steel rimmed, and this is not the case. The wheels are rubber rimmed, and this is something I've been yelling from the rooftops whenever I do a Porsche, Ferdinand, or Elephant type vehicle, for good reason. So, as a quick recap, the tires are rubber. Unlike the other vehicles like the Tiger 1 or the Panther, even the Panzer 4, where there's that big chunky rubber tire that's fitted onto the rim, on the Porsche design here, it's a bit, well, Porsche. And what I mean by that is that we have the rubber tire, which is this thin piece of rubber right here. That little, it looks like a little O-ring on this section. When you look at it from the side, this is actually rubber. And it has a T-shape to it, and it's secured in place with this perforated plate that's held in place with these fasteners. So on the real vehicle, if you ever have the opportunity to see one, either the Elephant for a while it was in the US, when I saw it was in Aberdeen, but I think it's in Bovington at the time of filming this video. If you have the opportunity to see the Elephant, go ahead, walk to the wheels and do this experiment yourself. The tire is actually rubber. And what you actually see through these holes here are rubber as well. So why this is relevant for a modeling aspect is when you're painting it, you want to make sure that the tire portion, the face area, is painted to look like rubber. And on my example over here, I just used Tamiya rubber black, and I painted it only to those areas. The front portion, even though it would be rubber on this portion here as well as into the holes, are almost always overpainted with the base coat, and so you will not have the rubber protruding through these areas from the start. This is the type of thing that you would start seeing the paint chipping off over time, but when the vehicle was new or mostly new, you're not exactly going to have rubber popping out through these areas here, and also they're not exactly in a really snag prone location, specifically with the locations in between the perforations. However, the tires themselves, a little tricky to get on camera, are rubber on the actual vehicle. A lot of people out there, they paint them steel or they don't paint them at all, both of which are wrong. If you're building any sort of these vehicles, remember that the tires are rubber. And again, don't believe me? Take a trip to Bovington or Kubinka if you can and take a look at the real one and then get back to me on that. Me personally, I could attest to it because I literally played with the rubber tire on the Elephant when it was sitting in Aberdeen, the parking lot in Aberdeen specifically. Carrying on takes to the sprockets. The sprockets on these pattern vehicles are very interesting because you have not one set but two sets, one for the front and one for the rear. And on the model over here, these are the kit original components, and they went on all right. However, the one part that made the installation difficult was with the mud scoops that are found on the inner portions here of both of these sprockets. These are done at the very tail end of the build. After the sprockets are installed, I then have to carefully slip these pieces in and glue them in place, much along the lines on a KV or even a Stalin. However, on the Ferdinand here, it's a bit more problematic because you have to do it 4 times. The two in the front are relatively easy to get to. It's the ones in the back that I remember a lot of curse words were flying out during the time. On my builds, with the way I installed the tracks, they are installed with the sprockets at the tail end of the build, and they just slip in place. And this is then, the next thing to do is to add the mud scoops. You need to do that before you mount on the suspension or the swing arms, because by that point there's so much clutter going on in here, you're not exactly going to be able to fit those pieces in very easily with all that stuff in the way. So that's best done in a layer type format. And on that note takes us to the track. Obviously, the biggest change that was made to this model was replacement of the so-called magic tracks with the proper metal workable links. And these metal tracks here are worth every single penny. They were awesome. As I mentioned before, I'm going to have a separate tutorial and review video on these tracks over here, and you can see how I install them onto the tank. And this is something I definitely recommend specifically for anyone that has any of these type of vehicles with the Link and Link track. These metal tracks here are just better in every which way. They make the model more enjoyable to build, they are easier to put together, and they look better compared to Lincoln Link tracks on their best day. Cannot recommend them enough. The other thing about the tracks is that since they are metal, they give the model a nice weight to it, and it just settles it down on any terrain I put on very nicely. It just makes for a more robust feeling build. The other thing that's noteworthy about the tracks is because since they are made out of metal, they have this natural sag to them, which is very true to form to the real ones, and it works perfectly on the model over here. Once you have the track at the correct tension, gravity will run its course, and you don't have to worry about any sort of forming or anything along those lines. The only time you may need to go ahead and assist the track a little bit is if you move the tank around. When you put it back on the table, sometimes the teeth don't line up onto the wheel, but just a little nudge here or there with a toothpick or something, and you're good to go. For the paint and weathering work, I went with my usual format. Because these tracks here are made out of metal, obviously they're impervious to any harsh chemicals found in those paints. So I went ahead and used that for the paint application, as opposed to my usual go-to, which is a Tamiya flat black acrylic. That's only done on single-piece vinyl. When you have workable tracks, this opens up the margins a little bit on what you can use to paint them. And on metal tracks specifically, you have really nothing holding you back, and you can use the harshest paints that you can possibly find. Not saying that that's something that you must do, but generally speaking, get the tracks to resemble this with the other methods, it requires some extra steps of painting. With these ones here, they're basically good to go from the can. After the paint is applied, the weathering was applied via the dry brushing method to get these scratch seal surfaces that I have. And on this note, I want to just briefly mention rust. And this is something I mention quite often in these videos. But generally speaking, track weathering doesn't really get rust until many years later, left outdoors unattended. And even in those type of circumstances, you still won't even see that much rust. A lot of modelers out there, when they weather their tracks, they like to over-rust them or over-weather them, in my opinion. And this is something that's, one, not necessarily true to form, because first, these tracks are actually made out of a metal alloy, and they actually are rust resilient. And with the addition of the coating on top, parkerization or some kind of an oxide type coating, this further restricts the ability for rust to grow on these surfaces. The only time you'll really see rusty surfaces, like I mentioned before, if the tank was neglected outdoors for 40 plus years, then you're going to start seeing some rust. Also, you'd start to see rust after the thing was destroyed or blown up because there was a fire that changes everything, and then you will definitely, most certainly, have very heavily rusty tracks. Something else to keep in mind, specifically with a vehicle like the Ferdinand here, these were almost as brand new as you can possibly get during the Battle of Kursk, so you really don't want to see rusty tracks for these types of vehicles. It looks aesthetically pleasing when a lot of builders do it, but it's not something that would be true to form, and it's rather anachronistic. Similar is also true for the hubcaps. Generally, I have some sort of sweating effects going on, but again, these vehicles were still pretty new when they entered into the field, so the bearings were brand new, and you're not exactly going to have sweating going on or dripping when the seals and everything are as new as they possibly can be. On the topic of Zerk fittings, generally in my videos I mentioned the center portion of these German vehicles, they have a red painted Zerk fitting, and on this one here, you notice I didn't do it, and that's because honestly I couldn't find any photographs or references to point to that. The two examples that are still left in existence have both been thoroughly repainted several times, so the original paint on those sections are totally gone, lost to the sands of time, and there's no real clear photographs of these things that can clearly show that. So for this one here, I erred on the side of caution. I just left it in the overpainted format. But if I was to take a hunch, if I was to take an educated guess, I believe that center hole, or that center fasten over there, is the access to the Zerk fitting, which means, yes, you would have some grease effects going on there if the vehicles age a certain point, and more than likely, they may have also been painted in red. But again, for this vehicle here, I just went with the overpainted format. If I find any evidence out there or photographic proof of that, then I'll go ahead and make an addendum, and I can just easily add those red paint effects at a later date. But for now, the way you see it, it's going to live in this format for the foreseeable future. From the tracks moves us to the rear detailing. Here you get to see what it looks like in its final format. Starting with the no-tech light, obviously I went ahead and painted the little lenses that would be green on the real vehicle in these locations over here. It's a common bit of detailing that a lot of people tend to forget, just like with cat's eye lenses found on American vehicles. Same is also true for these no-techs. If you're building your German tank and it has this type of fitting on it, be sure to paint those little squares correctly. On this vehicle over here, they would be green, and for the green color, I use a very fine point paintbrush because obviously you don't have any room for error, and the green is actually Tester's enamel green. It is probably the best color out there to simulate the blackout lens coloring found on these World War II German tanks. And because it is a really glossy enamel, you don't have to add any sort of other additives to it in order to get a nice reflective sheen on it like you see on this example here. It's one of the few things that Tester's paints are actually good for. Other than that, Tester's products aren't really known to be the best. The remainder of the rear detailing takes to the hooks. These are the metal ones that I mentioned before, and they are awesome. It's one of the kit's high points, and they go on very nicely. The only thing to watch out for is on these pieces here, I paint and weather them off the model, and I add them at the tail end. And because of the layers of paint that build up on these sections, specifically where the pin needs to interact, you may have some tight tolerances due to the extra layers of paint, so you may have to do some hand fitting and do some paint scraping on the pin if this does happen to you. But because the pieces are metal, they're quite robust, and a few scrapes with a X-Acto on the stem, or even a little pass through with a round needle file on the eye holes over here, it's more than enough to clear out the tolerances for the pieces to fit. Once they're installed in place, obviously they're not going anywhere. With the model turned on its side, you get to really appreciate the paint and weathering work done to the underhull. As we saw before, the kit has some excellent underhull detailing, and once painted and weathered, it really makes everything come to life, even though it's not exactly a visible part on the build. Also on this portion over here, you can see the mesh work and the other duct work that I was referencing before in better light, or hopefully better light. And again, the photo etch is a nice little touch that the kit does have. And also, as I mentioned before, hollowing out those three sections over there is another way to just squeeze out a little bit of extra accuracy out of the build, as opposed to just leaving them molded solid. One last thing to mention about the suspension that caught my eye when I had the piece on its side is, remember, on these Porsche parented vehicles, there are large rubber bump stops found on these sections over here. These are integrally molded on, and just a little swipe of rubber black during final assembly. It's a great way to complete the look to the way you see it here. Yes, it's one of those details that aren't exactly that visible, specifically when the model's on its right side up, but it's one of those things that if you paint them, the model's just that much more complete. And if you see the model in a certain angle or a certain light, these pieces actually do become quite visible. Hopping to the front takes us to the front detailing now. So starting with the hooks, same exact type of fittings as I mentioned before. Again, they're awesome. But now you also get to see the work done to the jack and the jack block. As I mentioned earlier, because of the photo etch found on this kit, I had to go ahead and do this one in a slightly different format compared to my standard builds. This one here, the jack was, again, installed onto the model and had to be carefully painted and weathered after the thing was in place, and also have to carefully work around the remainder of the paintwork in order not to cause any collateral damage. And as you can see, the piece came out as perfect as I can get. Careful paintwork is the key for this one here. You want to make sure that your brush is in the perfect condition and that the paints are at just the right consistency. Not too chunky and not too thin. If you get that balanced out, you can then go ahead and have results that are similar here. For the painting application, I actually took a trick that I saw in the Japanese magazine Armor Modeling that I have that's many, many decades old. But that fella was describing how to carefully paint stuff like this, and you have to go in here with like an index card or some tape, and you just carefully mask the under areas or the reverse areas so that when you're painting these things, you don't have any collateral damage, or you mitigate it as much as possible. Once everything is completed, though, it does look the part very nicely. And as I mentioned before, even though the PE for the jack was a bit fiddly, I was still able to persevere, and you really get to reap those rewards in its final format. The PE does look excellent on these components. And this takes us to the jack block, and the jack block itself, you can see it with all of its final splendor. As we can recall, this was a piece that's supplied with the kit with detailing molded on, but you, the builder, have to amputate and polish all that away in order for you to replace those molded in details with the photo etch option. And now that you can see it in its final format, I gotta say, in my opinion, it's more or less a wash. The two aspects, though, that I will say that the PE is an improvement over the kit one is first with the mounting harness and the strap. The strap that we have here, being PE, is actually a really smart choice because it's nice and thin, so it has that nice scale thickness to it. But also, you have that standoff from the piece, and it's something that would be found on the real vehicle, and it's not something that you can really mold in. So that's one positive. The other positive is with the handle. I don't recall if the handle was integrally molded on the plastic one, so the PE piece is, again, a nice little touch. However, the one aspect of the PE that, in my opinion, is a bit snake oil is with the rigidity straps that we have here on either side. They look essentially almost, in my opinion, identical to the molded in ones. So take that for what you will. If I was building the other version of the Dragon Ferdinand, the one with all the plastic parts, the older kit one, and I'm up to this component over here, I'm literally just going to use it as is without any worries about it. But your results may vary. Moving on takes to the tin work, and here you get to see some spare tracks mounted in the front areas. And these are actually, believe it or not, the magic tracks. I didn't just toss the entire bag into the spare bin. I actually did assemble a couple sets here on each side. When you're assembling a spare track like this, you may need to sculpt it a little to better give it a little bit more realism. And what I mean by that is the link on the very end, like right here, you have it bent downward because of the design of the hinge. It would lay like this if you had a little segment stretched out. So I went ahead and did that type of technique to both of these units over here. And then the pieces are just painted, weathered, and then mounted to the appropriate location. The straps are the kit ones and more or less went on all right. The pegs, though, are a bit shallow, so they don't go all the way down into the receptacle point found on the tin work. So when you're assembling one of these, you want to make sure you glue everything properly, and you can't really depend on those pins that are found molded into the straps. So the track itself is going to need to be molded, or I should say glued, to the tin work itself. As I mentioned before, the Bosch lights have their little power cords added in place, and once the model is completed, again, it gives that nice little polished look. Also, carrying on to the remainder of the tin work, you get to see those photo etch components that I was referencing before. During the weathering, it was a bit tricky because of how frail these little hooks are. They just love to snag the brush when I'm doing the dry brushing chipping techniques, and will pop off at their most earliest convenience and potentially even go to lost partia. So you want to stay on the ball with that and just make sure you're very cautious around those locations. But if you do, here's the end result, and it turned out quite well. Back to those boxes. Remember, one of these is the stock one, and the other one is a cast resin replacement for the photo etch one, and the two blend in absolutely perfectly and pair very well with each other quite nicely. On the bottom portion, we have the antenna tube right over here, which brings us to the antenna base. You'll notice that on this model here, I did not drill out this portion to add the antenna wire. It's far too thin for that. So I just rendered it in the format that we have here, that the antenna base is present, but the antenna is removed. Remember, on these real vehicles, the antennas are removable, which is why it necessitates a storage tube like we have right here. So you can render it in this format and still be correct. For German World War II antenna bases, painted in the same format, where the base itself would be a rubber black material, because the real ones are rubber, and then the stem is brass. In this case here, a little swipe of gold leaf was enough to get the look that you see here. Of course, when you're painting any vehicle, be sure that you properly paint the prisms. On the Ferdinand here, there's one on each side, little vision slit, little swipe of gloss black is really all you need. It's one of those things that are, again, commonly overlooked, but if you go ahead and do that, it gives the model a more complete and finalized look. On the reverse side, we have here a sledgehammer, as well as those other hooks I was referencing before. And now that everything is fully completed, you get a good idea on what everything looks like. Hopping back to the front takes us to the travel lock. As I mentioned before, this is semi-functional as it's hinged. However, the locking mechanism itself is non-functional, and the piece just can articulate in a very limited motion. Also, you get to see the periscopes. With the kit giving you clear plastic components for this, this is a very nice feature that the kit does have, but it's one that adds just a little bit of extra complexity and a little bit of extra required work. Normally when I'm doing these models, the hatches get glued in the shut position with the opaque periscopes added, and then after it's painted, you carefully go in there with a little brush of gloss black and you paint them. However, with the pieces being molded in clear plastic, this adds a little bit more complexity to the piece because you can't really build it and paint it all as one part because you're just going to get overspray on it and it negates the whole point of the clear lenses. So what I do is I carefully paint the hatch off the model, and I also paint the lenses separately. The bodies themselves are painted with first flat black, but then also a coat of Tamiya red-brown to simulate the red-brown bakelite, which would be common on these German periscopes. I believe you could also get away with black too as well, but I like to go with the red because it adds a little bit of extra color. Obviously, the one part you do not add the paint to is the lens portion itself, and you leave that in its El Natural color. Once the paint work is all done, and the weathering work is done, the lenses are removed off of their sprue, glued to the inside, and then once that's dry, the hatch is topped off like you see here. And once the look is complete, you have some very nice detailing components. Again, clear plastic periscopes are always something that adds a nice little bit of authenticity to any build. And the fact this kit gives it to you stock is another nice feature. Moving upward takes to the engine deck, and what you see here is what the kit gives you. Nothing really much going on over here. I just had a little sweating effects where the fuel filler caps are for reasons that are fairly obvious. If anyone's ever had to top off fuel on a piece of heavy equipment, you tend to have a drip or two take place. Moving our way rearward takes to the rear fighting compartment area, and you get to see what it looks like with everything now in its final form, being painted and weathered. Moving topside, you get to see the detailing in this portion over here. Also, don't forget to paint your optic. A lot of people tend to overpaint that, and it's one of those pieces that looks good when you go ahead and paint it appropriately. For this one here, I went with flat black, weathered it with a little bit of dry brushing, but most importantly, don't forget to paint the lens, something that's commonly overlooked on a lot of builds out there. Probably one of my more favorite aspects of this build are the rear periscopes that we have here that are concealed under these two armored manhole type hatches. They're really interesting in that Dragon went ahead and molded them as separate components, which allows you to model them either in the fully closed state, or you can model them like I did here in the peekaboo state. To do this, the hatches and the periscopes are obviously painted off the model and are out at the tail end. Just like with the periscopes on the bow hatch, these two are clear, and I painted and weathered them in the same type of format that I mentioned with the other components for the bow hatch. Why this is interesting to point out is that this was the first kit to actually offer these components stock out of the box. The other kit, again being the Italeri rendition, had these details found on the model, but they were just integrally molded in the closed position in the rear section over here. So the fact that this kit allows you to render it in a few different options is a very nice touch. And moving to the front of the build takes us to the front armor section here with those gutters. Now that you can see what they look like painted and weathered, the PE's very nice in these locations as well. The plastic ones are alright, but the PE ones just look a little bit better because of the scale thicknesses. Also on this section over here, you get to see the rear portion of the mantlet with the little flange mechanism I was mentioning before. And this brings us to the main armament itself. As we also saw earlier, this was the aluminum version, as it was the best of the three, and now that it's painted and weathered, you can see just how excellent everything looks. One tip that I do recommend, again, is to lightly hit the surfaces of these type of components with a little bit of fine sandpaper. This will help when it comes time to get the thing painted, and once the paint sticks to it in a nice even way, this is basically the end result that you should have. Obviously, you want to use a very fine, leathery sandpaper. You don't want to gouge it or anything crazy like that. Just use the right grit sandpaper and you should be fine. Also, in this section over here, you get to see the muzzle brake. As I mentioned before, this was a multi-piece assembly, but once you're done with it and you properly remove the seams, the piece is excellent. Very nicely detailed out, also very nicely engineered. And once it's done, it completes the look very well. In case anyone's wondering, yes, the armament is still fully functional, as you can see. One thing that I did notice about this build over here is that the tolerances on the trunnion sections are nice and tight. so you don't have to worry about the thing drooping on you like you would with several other type of builds that are out there. And that's all there is to the detailing, and this takes us to the paint and the markings. So for the model's paint work, I wanted to make it look like the box art with that green neck camo that is very iconic for this pattern of vehicle. For the paint work, before a drop of paint can land on the surface, of course, the model does need to be primed. For my primer, I roll with El Cheapo flat black spray paint, and it's applied in a thin, concise manner. Once the even layer of paint is at a nice opacity, it's then time to switch over to the airbrush. For the base coat itself, it's my tried and true exterior flat latex house paint that I had custom mixed to a shade of Dunkelgelb. After the Dunkelgelb was added, it was then time to do the camo. What you see here is done again via the airbrush, and it's Tamiya olive green. After the camo work was done, the model then slid off into weathering, and the weathering is a mix of, again, airbrush and dry brushing. The airbrush weathering effects would include some filtering as well as a wash, and then the counter shading was also done via the airbrush. For my counter shading, I use a diluted Tamiya acrylic flat black, and I go ahead and just do my counter shading with that type of material. After the airbrushing is done, it's then time to go into the panel line accent, and this is done with Tamiya panel line accent. And for a vehicle like this, where you have these nice puzzle-fitting weld sections, as well as a lot of nooks, crannies on the suspension, and all these fasteners here on the front, it really does the job very nicely. It goes in there, seeps in, and really, again, does what's advertised on the tin. Once the Tamiya panel line accent was done, it's then time to do the dry brushing for the chipping effects. Once the dry brushing is completed, what you see here is the end result. Some powder fouling was also done at the very tail end of the build, but the one thing that you'll see absent on this are any sort of exhaust soot, and that is because on the Ferdinand family of vehicles, the exhausts are on the bottom portion here of the tin work, so you don't really get to see some serious effects like you would see on several other type of vehicles that are out there. Also, again, for weathering on this vehicle, you want to go a bit lighter than on some other examples because these vehicles were still very new when they took place in the Battle of Kursk, which this one is. On that note, this brings us to the markings. So the model gives you quite an extensive bunch of markings. It's actually, again, one of the high points found on this kit. So you could render it in a multitude of different configurations. For me, I went with this one over here because I just liked the way it had that nice big marking here on the back, and I also really dug the division that we have here. It's a really cool logo. The markings were water slide decals, and they are excellent. They went on without any sort of problems. And then once they were applied to the necessary areas, the entire model was sealed with, you guessed it, VMS matte varnish. The stuff's applied via the airbrush, and the end result is exactly what you see. The only thing with the matte varnish is you need to do it before you install the hatches, because again, these ones have clear plastic prisms, and it would be really anticlimactic to get matte varnish on prisms. It kind of dulls them out and negates the whole point of having the clear, shiny plastic parts. Same is also true for the tail light, or the no-tech light, that I mentioned before. Outside of that, the stuff is absolutely excellent, and it's my go-to for a really good reason whenever I build basically anything. Love that stuff, and I'll be definitely using it for the foreseeable future. And in the end, I am very happy in how this build turned out. As I mentioned before, the Ferdinand was one of those vehicles that was always eluding my collection. I've built a couple examples of elephants. However, a proper Ferdinand was one of those vehicles that was just absent for one reason or another. So to have this one finally in the collection, it's definitely a blank spot that has been filled in. The overall build experience was pretty pleasant for the most part. The kit did throw some curveballs at me here or there. Some were expected, some were rather unexpected. Having said all that, now that I've gone through it, it was definitely an experience I did enjoy and would definitely be one I would tackle again with any of the other number of similar kits that are produced by Dragon. And that is the perfect point to pivot us into skill level and recommendations. So straight out of the gate, if you're a beginner, no, absolutely not. Do not even think about looking at one of these kits, let alone buying one, and even worse, attempting to build it. This is most certainly capital N, capital O, capital T, not going to be the kit for you. Carry on, find something else, build up your skill sets before you even think about trying to build one of these models. For a intermediate builder, and this is specifically for the premium edition kit that I have here, the answer is maybe. If you've built a number of kits already under your belt, you've done about 30 or so, by that point there, I think your skill set should be honed into the point where you can tackle this kit over here. One thing that is nice about it is that the basic kit itself, the standard plastic kit of the Dragon Ferdinand, is one that an intermediate can build without any problems, with the exception of the tracks. But that we'll put a pin in that for a moment. The basic kit itself goes together very well, and the detailing on it is quite good. Where this kit becomes more complex, though, is with the extra photo etch. And as we saw in this video, some of the photo etch I omitted for one reason or another. Well, if you are the type of person who is still trying to figure out how to do PE, or you've done maybe one simple, like grill covers on vehicles, and you wanted to stretch your legs a bit and try something a little bit more challenging, then this kit over here becomes something to potentially try out. The PE is, of course, included with the kit, but it's not nearly as complex compared to some other kits out there that are just ludicrously ridiculous with some of the parts they give you. It's nuts. Even on this kit, like I stated before in this video, some of the components that are PE honestly aren't as good as the plastic ones, and you can try out working with the PE parts, and if it doesn't work out for you, well, you have an insurance policy standard on the kit being the injection molded polystyrene part, and if you don't like how the PE is coming out, you can just swap it out with the standard kit one and move on. That is one really nice attribute that this kit really does have. As for an advanced builder, yes, absolutely. If you are an advanced builder, this kit should probably be something that you're going to be into. Again, with the added aftermarket components. A lot of guys out there, they purchase a kit and they have to go ahead and purchase extra photo etch and turned metal parts in order to spice up a base starter kit. Well, with the premium edition kit over here, it essentially gives you that out of the box. I'm pretty sure someone's going to say that, well, this brand of aftermarket photo etch is better than this one and what have you. In my opinion, what you see here is actually on par with some of the other makes on the market. Some other companies come to mind with like ET and Voyager. Some of those brands have some excellent upgrade components. However, with the ones that the stock kit gives you, in my opinion, it makes the addition of those other kits or those other upgrades rather unnecessary. And while on the topic of aftermarket parts, this vehicle here being a 1/35th scale Ferdinand, there are lots of other aftermarket components that are available that could potentially be added to this model in order to spice it up further. Is it worth it? Again, this is always best left up to the discretion of the builder. In my opinion, with the PE that the kit gives you as well as the other parts, it's not necessary, I find, with the exception of one tiny crucial bit of equipment. And you know where I'm going to be going with this, guys? The tracks. Yes, if you are building one of these models, the workable tracks are not just an accessory, but are, in my opinion, mandatory. Individual Lincoln Link tracks suck. Don't care what anyone says. They're trash. The workable metal tracks here are absolutely exquisite and are a must-have. I don't care if it's a older Dragon kit. I don't care if it's even the new Tamiya Elephant kit, because apparently that one has Lincoln Link also. If it's got Lincoln Link tracks, just replace it outright, close your eyes, and buy the workable track links. They will easily make the build not only easier to assemble, because these tracks are quite easy to build compared to Lincoln Links, which are just a mess. And yes, I don't care what anyone says, Lincoln Links are harder to assemble compared to ones where you drive a pin through. Also, they just have a better, more realistic and organic look to them compared to shoehorned Indy Links attempting to try to contort around round objects and get the bends and stuff like that. The tracks, again, also add the model weight, and it just makes the model just seem just that much more polished and that much more complete. Again, the tracks are mandatory. If you're buying one of these kits or any of the Dragon or similar type kits that have a similar type of track setup, the tracks are mandatory. I really cannot state that enough. And there's nothing much more needs to be said about that, which brings us directly to recommendations. So, straight from the get-go, if you are a fan of the German World War II Zoo, the Ferdinand here is most certainly going to be one to add to your collection. If you dig the World War II Porsche vehicles, like the Elephant, the VK4502 hybrids, the Mas, then the Ferdinand here, again, is going to be a complete no-brainer. Another person who I'd recommend this kit to is anyone who's, again, a fan of just the Eastern Front. If you're the type of guy that digs the battles of Kursk or Pavarotka or any of the other battles that took place on the steppes, then the Ferdinand here is a very noteworthy vehicle to have in your collection. On a similar note, if you're a fan of tank destroyers or even the German Panzerjägers, again, the Ferdinand here is another one of those pieces that, in my opinion, is truly a must-have. And with that, that wraps up this model showcase video for this 1/35th scale German World War II Ferdinand tank destroyer. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being small scale model showcase videos like this one over here, or the other larger scale project update videos that frequently get posted. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There I have more photographs of this particular model, as well as photos of the other smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by EastCoastArmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. See you there. And in a Marvel movie-esque post-credit cutscene, here you get to see the hull that this Ferdinand kit came out of. And in these two boxes, we have some really, really cool and exotic kits. And by the way, these two boxes are quite literally filled to the brim. So there's going to be a lot of really cool content that are going to be posted in the coming months. Stay tuned for that.